I'm going to tell you 5 pieces of recording gear that I think are worth splurging on, and then at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you a few that might be a waste of your hard-earned cash. After 15 years of recording and producing artists, including 10 years in a commercial studio, I've come to understand what pieces of gear are really going to contribute to making your songs sound better and your sessions easier, and what you can afford to cheap out on. So without further delay, let's talk about item number 1 that I'm willing to splurge on, and that is a great recording interface. So the main reason you don't want to go cheap with a recording interface is because all the audio that you're recording is going to run through this one interface. Right now, I have the Universal Audio X8P, which was around $3,000. And that is a big investment, but I'm recording all the time professionally. For someone who's just getting into it or doing this as a hobby, I think around $200 is a great price point for something like a Motu M2 or a Focusrite Scarlett. You don't have to break the bank when you're buying an interface, but I would definitely avoid these $30 to $60 interfaces that you can find online. I found that the preamps just sound noisy and not good, and the audio that you're recording through them is not going to sound appealing. So when you're buying an interface, definitely save up and buy the best one you can afford. Next up on the list is something that is completely overlooked by a lot of people, and that is quality microphone stands. A lot of the cheapest mic stands that I've bought have ended up stripping out, so you basically just end up with a big pile of metal garbage. A really nice mic stand is going to have all metal construction instead of the plastic screws and connections that a cheap microphone stand has. These premium mic stands will last a really long time if you take care of them. I've had the ultimate support mic stands for at least a decade now, and they still work amazingly. All the parts are made of metal, they can telescope up super high, so they make great drum overheads, and I am never worried about them tipping over because they have a super heavy rolling base. The wheels on these mic stands also lock, so you don't have to worry about them rolling away. Now, these mic stands that I use are around $300, but there are some for around $150 that I'll link in the description that have very similar features. While $150 to $300 does sound like a lot for a mic stand, it is so much cheaper than having to buy a new mic because your flimsy mic stand fell over. And speaking of heavy microphones, number 3 on this list is going to be large diaphragm condenser recording microphones. So when you think of studio microphones, LDC or large diaphragm condensers is usually what you're thinking of. These are big mics that require phantom power, and they capture all the detail and all the nuance of things like vocals, acoustic guitars, and other acoustic instruments. These mics play a huge factor in how your finished product is going to sound, so I suggest you do not cheap out on them. Now, the next item up on the list isn't technically a piece of recording gear, it's more of an instrument, but it's a nice quality acoustic guitar. Now, when you record electric guitar, you can change the pickups, you can run the guitar through tons of pedals, you can change the pots, you can play through different amps. There are all these customizable factors that let you upgrade an electric guitar over time. But with an acoustic guitar, what you're buying at the store is what you're taking home, and that's what you have forever. So when you're buying an acoustic guitar, I encourage you to go for something nice and something that sounds really premium. I found that cheaper acoustic guitars have this boxy, plasticky feel that I don't really like, and it doesn't really sit well in a mix. So because of that, I would suggest springing for a nice acoustic guitar, especially if you're in a singer-songwriter type of genre where that's going to be the star of your song. And honestly, if you can't afford a nice acoustic guitar, I feel like everybody knows at least one person who has a super nice acoustic that they might let you borrow when you're doing sessions. And the last item that I am totally willing to splurge on is a great quality pair of studio headphones. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, why did he say headphones instead of studio monitors? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. If you have a nice pair of studio monitors, but your room that you're sitting in is not acoustically treated, then they are practically worthless. You need to have a good acoustic environment to really take advantage of a great pair of studio monitors. But with a pair of headphones, it does not matter what room you're sitting in, they're going to sound the same. Now, the second reason that I don't splurge on super premium studio monitors is because I am not a mix engineer, I'm a producer, and I am sending my songs out to mixers to go get mixed. And those are the people that have already splurged on those studio monitors. If you want a great pair of closed back headphones, the Maze Audio 99 Classics are a favorite of mine, coming in at around $300. But if you want some open back headphones, I'm a really big fan of Sennheiser, especially the HD 600, 650, or 700s. So now that I've covered all the gear that I'm willing to splurge on, let's cover some of the stuff that I think you might be wasting your money on. Starting out, I'm gonna go with super expensive premium cables. Now, you don't want to buy the absolute worst bottom of the barrel cables, but I found that store brand cables from places like Guitar Center and Sweetwater will work totally fine and are durable. And honestly, if you don't mind doing a little bit of soldering, you can typically repair either cheap or expensive cables, which is just going to expand their life cycle further. The second thing that a lot of producers waste money on is outboard gear. Now, I'm not saying that outboard gear can't sound amazing and contribute to a great sounding record. I've used tons of outboard gear myself, and truthfully, a lot of it sounds fantastic. However, it is so much more affordable to just stick with software plugins. For one, they are cheaper, but number two, you also can have unlimited instances of that plugin where when you just buy a piece of hardware, you just have the one piece and you can only use it on one track at a time. Not to mention, you're probably gonna have to buy a patch bay, tons of patch cables, and then every time you use that gear, you're gonna have to do recalls. I have a couple key pieces of outboard gear that I still use, but for the most part, I'm sticking with plugins. And the last thing I've decided not to splurge on is dynamic instrument mics. Now, I've used all kinds of instrument mics, from expensive ones like the MD421 all the way down to the cheapest ones. And I gotta say, mics like the Shure SM57 and Sennheiser E609 are both incredible, and they clock in at only $100. I've used the SM57 as the snare mic on countless drum recordings, and the E609 is a fantastic mic for miking up guitar amps. And with both of these coming in at $100, you really can't go wrong. So when you're building your studio, don't hesitate to buy those affordable dynamic mics, and then use the rest of your budget to grab an even better condenser mic. And speaking of condenser mics, this video over here is all about a brand of condenser mics that I had never heard of that you are definitely going to want to check out when you're making your next studio purchase.